Elliot Hayes had worked at Marston & Cole Advertising for 3 years, and in all that time he had never once imagined that Camille Whitfield, the sharp-tongued creative director, who ran the 4th floor like a general commanding troops, would ever say his name outside of a status meeting. She was the kind of woman people described in hushed tones near the coffee machine. Brilliant, exacting, unreachable. Her blazers were always pressed, her opinions always right, and her patience for excuses always thin. Elliot respected her. He also, if he was honest with himself on the long drive home some nights, thought about her more than a man in his position probably should. It was a Thursday in late October when everything shifted. The agency had thrown its quarterly celebration. The kind of forced fun office, party with charcuterie boards nobody touched and a playlist someone in HR had clearly curated for maximum inoffensiveness. Elliot had planned to slip out early, the way he usually did, but he'd lingered by the parking garage elevator a beat too long. Phone in hand, and that was when he saw her. Camille was standing beside her silver sedan, hazard lights blinking uselessly, her heels sinking slightly into a puddle from the afternoon rain. She had her phone pressed to her ear, and even from a distance, Elliot could hear the frustration in her voice, tight and controlled the way it always was, even when things weren't going her way. "It won't start," she said, more to herself than to him. When she noticed him approaching, "The battery, I think. Or the alternator. I don't know. I don't know anything about cars," she laughed. But it wasn't really a laugh. It was the sound someone made when they were too tired to be embarrassed. "I can give you a ride," Elliot offered, surprising himself with how easily the words came out. "It's no trouble." She looked at him for a long moment. The kind of look that made him feel like she was recalculating something. Recalculating him. Maybe the quiet junior. Copywriter who sat 2 departments, over and rarely spoken, meetings unless directly asked. "You don't have to do that." "I know, I want to." Something in her posture softened, just slightly, like a held breath finally released. "Okay," she said. "Thank you, Elliot." It was strange, hearing his name in her mouth like that. Not clipped and professional, but soft, almost grateful. The drive should have taken 20 minutes. Traffic on the interstate stretched it to 40, and somewhere between the silence and the hum of the radio, they started talking, really talking. Not the surface-level exchanges of the office. She told him about growing up in a small town outside Sacramento, about a father who ran a hardware store and never understood why she wanted to move to the city. He told her about his mother, who still called every Sunday to ask if he was eating enough vegetables, and about the screenplay he'd been quietly working on for 2 years. He'd never shown anyone. "You write?" she asked, turning to look at him properly for what felt like the first time. "Badly," he said. "But yes, I doubt that." Her voice had none of its usual edge. "You write client emails that don't sound like client emails. That's rarer than people think." He didn't know what to say to that, so he just smiled and kept his eyes on the road, aware of how close she was in the passenger seat, aware of the particular quiet that had settled between them, comfortable in a way he hadn't expected. When they finally reached her building, a converted brownstone with ivy creeping along the brick, warm light spilling from a few windows, Elliot pulled up to the curb and put the car in park, waiting for her to gather her things and say goodnight the way people did after favors like this, polite, final. Instead, Camille sat there for a moment, her hand resting on the door handle but not pulling it. The streetlight outside caught the side of her face, and Elliot noticed for the first time how tired she looked underneath the composure. Not tired from the day, but tired in a deeper way. The kind of exhaustion that came from holding everything together for a long time. "Please don't take me home yet," she whispered. The words landed strangely, quiet and unguarded. Nothing like the Camille Whitfield who ran editorial meetings with the precision of a surgeon. Elliot turned to look at her, unsure if he'd heard correctly. "I'm sorry? I know how that sounds." She let out a breath, pressing her palms against her thighs like she was trying to steady herself. I don't want to go inside yet. That apartment is so quiet, Elliot. It's been quiet for a long time. My ex moved out 8 months ago, and I still haven't rearranged the furniture because it would mean admitting he's actually not coming back. I redecorate everything else in my life except that." She laughed, but her eyes were glassy. "God, I don't know why I'm telling you this." Elliot didn't answer right away. He thought about all the times he'd watched her in the office, commanding rooms, delivering feedback with surgical precision, never once betraying anything close to vulnerability. He'd built an entire image of her in his mind, untouchable, self-sufficient, a woman who didn't need anyone, and here she was, unraveling that image with 5 whispered words that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with loneliness. "We can drive around a little," he said finally. "If that helps, no rush." She looked at him like she hadn't expected kindness to be so simple. "You don't think I'm insane? I think you've been holding a lot together for a long time." he said. That's not insane. That's just heavy. They didn't drive far. Just a loop through the quieter streets near the river, past shuttered bakeries and a park with its lights just starting to flicker on for the evening. Camille talked more than Elliot had ever heard her talk. About the marriage that had quietly fallen apart before it ever really began. About the promotion she'd worked herself sick for that had left her more isolated than fulfilled. About a version of herself she barely recognized anymore. Someone who used to paint on weekends and hadn't picked up a brush in 3 years. I don't know when I became someone who's good at her job and bad at her life, she said, staring out at the dark water. I used to have both. Elliot didn't try to fix it. He didn't offer platitudes or the kind of easy advice people gave when they didn't know what else to say. He just listened, the way he'd always wanted someone to listen to him. And somewhere in that listening, something between them shifted. Not into romance, not yet, but into a kind of honesty neither of them had expected to find on a Thursday night in October. When he finally dropped her home for real, nearly 2 hours later, she lingered at the car door again. But this time, there was no hesitation in her voice. Thank you for tonight, she said. Not just the ride, all of it. Anytime, Elliot said, and meant it more than he'd meant almost anything in a long time. He thought that would be the end of it. A strange, tender evening tucked away as a memory. Something he'd think about on quiet drives but never speak of again. Monday would come, and Camille Whitfield would be his boss once more, composed and untouchable, and the version of her from that car ride would stay sealed in the past like something too fragile to bring into daylight. But Monday came, and something had changed. She found him by the break room, coffee in hand, and instead of the clipped professionalism he expected, she offered him a small, private smile, the kind reserved for someone who had seen a part of you nobody else had. How's the screenplay? She asked. Slow, he admitted. But it's a hobby I've been ignoring for 2 years, so slow is progress. Send me the first 10 pages, she said. I want to read it. It became a quiet thing between them after that. Coffee some mornings, a walk during lunch a few times, conversations that lingered longer than they needed to. Nothing happened quickly, and nothing happened the way office romances did in movies, with grand declarations or stolen kisses in supply closets. It happened slowly, the way real things tend to, in small honesties. In the way she started laughing more easily around him, in the way he started noticing that her office door was often open when he passed, an invitation neither of them named out loud. 3 months later, on a rainy evening not unlike the night her car had broken down, Elliot found himself standing outside her apartment again, this time by choice, holding a bag of takeout from the Thai place she'd mentioned once in passing months earlier. When she opened the door, surprised and smiling, the apartment behind her looked different. New curtains, a canvas propped against the wall with the beginnings of a painting on it. Colors he hadn't seen in her wardrobe or her office, wild and unguarded. You're painting again, he said. I am, she said, stepping aside to let him in. Turns out I just needed someone to remind me I was allowed to. They didn't rush what came next. There was no dramatic confession, no movie-perfect kiss under rain-soaked streetlights. There was just an evolving certainty, a slow unlearning of the walls both of them had built for different reasons. His, out of quiet self-doubt about ever being enough for someone like her. Hers, out of years spent proving she didn't need anyone at all. It was almost a year later, on the anniversary of that broken-down car and the quiet ride that started it all, that Elliot took her back to that same stretch of road by the river, now lined with string, lights for a small local festival neither of them had known was happening. Camille laughed when she realized where they were, tears gathering unexpectedly in her eyes. You remembered, she said. 5 words, Elliot said, taking her hand. I don't think I could forget them if I tried. She looked at him, the woman who once ran meetings like a general and now stood in the golden light of string bulbs with paint-stained fingertips and an unguarded heart. And she smiled the way people do when they've finally, fully arrived somewhere safe. Please don't take me home yet, she whispered again. But this time there was no loneliness behind it. Only quiet, certain joy, the kind that comes from being exactly where you want to be, with exactly the right person in no hurry at all to leave.